Okay, welcome back to the Snap. Michael Heaver here alongside Patrick O'Flynn. Patrick, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Just remembering it's a bank holiday weekend. It's kind of difficult to pin down these things these days, but there's that to look forward to. Elections coming next week, which are always exciting to political anoraks like us. And we'll see if it's the result that the whole of the Westminster establishment is pinning its hopes on, or if it goes the other way.
Absolutely. And before we get on to that, guys, if you haven't yet, please do hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss the next episode. We'll be doing lots more of these shows. Don't want you to miss that. Now, Patrick, we're going to start off, as you touched upon there, this continued obsession really that we're seeing in Westminster. And we've talked about this before, but it's becoming even more severe. Now, before we get into the actual reality of where British public opinion is, which is completely different, I think, to the Westminster bubble, I just want to put this to you, first of all, that this is kind of this sort of anti-Boris, anti-conservative campaign we're really seeing from some sections of the media, this obsession from some journalists. It reminds me to not that long ago when me and you were both involved with UKIP, where if you remember before one particular set of elections, there was what felt like a sort of daily demented campaign to try and dent the party's prospects at the next election. I've got to say, I kind of feel like this has gone completely out of control, and it's feeling pretty similar to me. And I think what we could be seeing now is the British public actually a backlash against this obsession with bubble stories that no one really cares about.
I think so. I think you're referring to the run up to the 2014 European elections when we had the whole of the establishment, including the Tory party, let's not forget, throwing their kind of spears and bombs and grenades at us every single day. And I think to some extent it did backfire because a lot of voters really disliked the whole political establishment at the time. And they thought, well, if UKIP's getting up their noses, then I'm more likely to vote for them. And I think there is an element of that now with Boris Johnson and the Conservatives, but particularly with Boris Johnson, that it seems to be almost all the same people who got overexcited in the great prorogation row of 2019, where the Prime Minister was ruled to have done something unlawful by the Supreme Court. And they all, the SNP, Labour, the Lib Dems, they thought they had the Prime Minister banged to rights and he was on his way out. But there was a general election shortly afterwards. He won it by a landslide because the British public in general like to see a prime minister standing up against an out-of-touch establishment.
Yeah, and rather than just sort of Westminster gossip, we're actually basing what the British public are interested in or not on the facts. And the facts are there hasn't been a single poll since any of this so-called sleazegate kicked off that has shown Labour really gaining that much support or the Conservatives losing any. In fact, there was one that's come out from the Independent last night. This is BMG, where Boris Johnson, when the British public are asked who would you prefer as Prime Minister, Boris Johnson's up 5 to 40%, Keir Starmer's down 4 to 24%, and personal satisfaction ratings we've seen consistently, Patrick, when the British public are asked Boris or Starmer, Boris Johnson still has a huge lead. So this this perception, I think, that this is what voters across the country care about and are talking about, I think is completely and utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it's right. The metropolitan left is missing the big picture. The big picture is we voted to leave the EU. We've left the EU. There's a new paradigm. There's new possibilities. As Boris Johnson said in PMQs, one of the Brexit freedoms meant that he was able to pull the plug on the European Super League because he suddenly had in his back pocket the potential for blocking work permits for any players signed by those clubs. There's all sorts of ways in which Brexit and UK independence will help make the country better, but the left seems stuck on this revenge mission. It hasn't accepted it. It's not thinking creatively about how to make the best of things. And also on COVID and vaccines, its narrative is out of date of Britain being a massive failure when, half the entire population of the country has had at least one vaccination. A quarter has had both vaccinations. We're opening up. The economy's going to boom. So I think that the left are fighting old battles that they lost at the time anyway. And, you know, I personally think they're going to have a difficult day next Thursday as a result, and will thoroughly deserve it, and won't get rated or won't get looked at by a large swathe of voters until they come to terms with the fact that they have been out of touch and they are the ones that need to change.
And a really remarkable thing that we've seen, again, consistently in all the research that's been done at the moment, and again, this was in the BMG research yesterday, is that Conservative voters are far more satisfied with Boris Johnson. In fact, in this poll, it was 72 of Tory voters, 72% satisfied with Boris Johnson versus 16% dissatisfied. They are far more satisfied with Boris Johnson's performance than Labour voters are with Keir Starmer. In that same poll, Starmer was only backed by 44% versus 72% of party voters. So at the same time as 72% of Tory voters are satisfied with Boris Johnson, only 44% satisfied of Labour voters satisfied with Keir Starmer, 27% dissatisfied. And I put it again, Patrick, I think you're right. These elections next week, if they go the way that I think they will, I think you're much more likely to see a leadership challenge to Starmer than you are Boris.
Yeah, I thought that the health minister, the vaccines minister, Nadim Zahawi, had a nice cheeky line in a TV interview today when he said he's worried for Keir Starmer because it could be curtains for Keir next Thursday. And, you know, that's more the reality. The more significant story is that Keir Starmer is skating on thin ice. He hasn't connected with large swathes of the electorate. If anything, under him, Labour has gone backwards in the so-called red wall seats with older working class, pro-Brexit, former Labour voters, no progress whatsoever. The Labour Party's in disarray, obviously have no policy offering on any of the major subjects of the day.
Yeah, and I just, before we move on, Patrick, I just want to highlight this as well, because this one sums it up to me. The BBC yesterday, I think Laura Koonsberg tweeted this out, and the BBC, I think they may have changed the name of the article now. It was a BBC News article. Why does the Downing Street flat revamp matter? Now, I put it to you, Patrick, that if the media have to constantly explain why they are so obsessed with a story and almost sell it as an important story to the British public, it ain't that important.
No, I think they've overplayed it. I mean, obviously, it's important that powerful people obey the rules. People will have their own view on whether it's wise to be spending such a lot of money on that flat, but ultimately taxpayers' money doesn't seem to have been spent beyond the normal allowance. And as you say, it's real criminology from a group of people who are removed from the public mood, where they're setting out these long pieces with multiple different headings about why all this matters, whether it's an intemperate remark the Prime Minister is said to have made, or the Dyson aspect was the most risible of all, where the Prime Minister just wanted to procure more ventilators to save British lives. So I think they're missing the mark. We discussed they may hope that there's a tiny element of undecided voters that will be swayed to go out and vote Labour next week. But increasingly, I'm not seeing it. I think we are in that 2014 UKIP moment, or the 2019 general election moment, where the ordinary punter who doesn't obsess about these leftish things is going to go out and spank the left-wing parties.
Now, moving on, Patrick, this is the most EU thing I've ever seen. It's only taken them 4 months to finally ratify the UK-EU deal in the European Parliament. And with that vote, just 5 MEPs voted against it, and apparently a couple of Greek communists and a sort of few others. I think that just sums it up, doesn't it, really, Patrick? They took 4 months to pass something that only 5 MEPs voted against in the end.
Yeah, and I think it was done with the expectation that the European Parliament would make itself look big and powerful and might cause people in Britain to gulp and fret about what they might do, in which case they must have been sorely disappointed. It's hardly caused a ripple. We're just not bothered. We're getting on with it, aren't we? And we're setting up quite nicely for the rest of the year. So the fact that it's happened now, I think we might see a bit more of Lord Frost, who's been quite quiet recently and is the cabinet minister now in charge of ongoing relations with the EU. I'm hoping that he'll start taking a harder public line on issues like the Northern Ireland Protocol and some of the other issues where the EU has sought to persecute Britain and British companies to do with the vaccines as well, and really challenge the EU to start seriously acting as a potential partner and friend, and not a foe, because otherwise we really do need to speed up our improvement of links to the rest of the world and downgrade the importance of the EU if it's always going to act like a foe rather than a friend.
I mean, they still couldn't help themselves. I mean, you had Ursula von der Leyen making sort of thinly veiled threats that the UK could be punished if we dared to veer from how the EU want to see the UK behave. You also saw an Angela Merkel ally in an interview saying that the EU wants no more British surprises and that there could be punitive tariffs and quotas on UK goods in the future. It seems to me, Patrick, once again, that the EU have learned absolutely nothing from Brexit. The one person who does actually, at a senior level in the EU, that does seem to understand, what Brexit was about, the will of the British people, and the fact that it actually may happen in other European countries, is Michel Barnier. He's the one that actually seems to say, well, the EU needs to learn from Brexit. Everyone else basically still now seems to view the UK with disdain and thinks that we can be bullied with threats of punitive tariffs and all the rest of it. To me, Patrick, the likes of Ursula von der Leyen and those people at that level in the EU have learned absolutely nothing from Brexit, and that is why I think it makes it more likely that you may see other countries in the future come out, because they haven't realised that you cannot simply ignore public opinion because it doesn't suit your worldview.
Yeah, and I think Barnier is interesting because I think he's catching on the mood in France in particular. I don't know whether he envisages he could be a late entrant into the presidential race with Macron really flailing and falling in the opinion polls. But he's anxious to show, isn't he, that he thinks the EU needs to change and become more responsive. I also think if the EU and Brussels thinks that they have massive leverage over the UK, and can threaten and punish us and make us change our ways, that they're really overreaching now. You even had, I think it was the chief executive of Tesco the other day saying that Brexit is guiding big economic players in Britain to shorten their supply lines, to actually source more stuff from within the UK anyway, which in turn feeds back into a stronger growth for the UK economy. So I think the whole drift of our economic approach is to become less dependent on supplies from the European Union, perhaps less dependent on it as an export market as well. So, we've been through the worst that these guys have had to throw at us. And it's really going to start backfiring more on them than on us as we look to the rest of the world. So we'll see if the Commission and the big national leaders can swallow their pride. But the idea that the Project Fear from Brussels to Britain is going to work anymore, I think is increasingly fanciful.
And I'll just end by saying, actually, it's important because you won't see any of this on UK TV, absolutely not, that not every MEP was up there attacking or threatening the UK. In fact, Antonio Maria Rinaldi, I posted his video on my channel yesterday, Italian economist and MEP. I mean, he basically apologised for the EU's behaviour and for anti-Brexit lies. He praised Britain. He predicted that the UK's growth would outpace the EU in years to come. He apologised for anti-Brexit lies. And he finished the speech, Patrick, by saying thank you and good luck. So we shouldn't give the impression, as sometimes you get in the media, that basically everyone in the EU now thinks less of the UK. There are a lot of people in the EU, MEPs, there is an increasing number of Eurosceptics right across the continent who really respect the stand that the UK has taken, the fact that the British people refuse to be bullied by the establishment.
Yeah, and I think public opinion in general across the major countries of Europe is heading in that direction. I saw a poll this morning, I think it was YouGov, of the French public that showed that now 37% of French voters think the UK has handled the vaccine, the coronavirus, the whole episode, better than France has. And that's up 17 points since the question was last asked, whereas the percentage saying the same of Germany has come down about 20 points. So the idea of the UK actually being the most successful country in Europe, certainly through the rest of this year, I think is starting to become common currency. And that's a massive problem for the integrationist, the European Commission. So everything's set fair. Let's just hope that that next Thursday's result in those elections sends a big signal about the mood of the country to the out of touch people at Westminster and in many parts of the media.
Well, not long till we find out. Guys, make sure that you've hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss the next episode of The Snap. The next episode will be coming soon. Patrick, we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, talk soon, Michael.